and applies to the entire jurisdiction of metro government. I'll dispense from reading I'll introduce now and make a part of the record a copy of the zoning code, a copy of which is at my desk, and I'll dispense from reading individual sections unless the applicant or opposition requests that I read those sections. The zoning code requires these proceedings to be taped. Therefore, it's imperative anyone wishing to address this board must come forward here to the table, identify yourself, and make your presentation. It should be noted that it's found that anyone's presented false or misleading testimony to this board that may have affected this board's decision. Any approval may be revoked at a later date by means of a show cause hearing. The board will go through all cases set for public hearing today, and then the board will vote and discuss and then vote on that case before you. The board is vested to act in the powers as outlined in Section 1740-180 of the Metro Code of Law. The code requires that 4 members of this 7-member board be present to constitute a quorum. Today, I'm expecting 6 of our 7 members to be present. The code also requires that you have 4 affirmative votes to grant your application. So today, I only have 6 members present. You must have 4 of the 6 votes in favor of your case to grant your appeal. If by chance we have a tie vote, and really the only possibility we have of that today would be a 3-3 vote, your case will stay on our agenda for the next 30 days. During the next 30 days, any of the 6 who participated can change their vote. The 7th member can review the record and become eligible, but that is at their discretion to do so. If after that 30 days, and in our case, we only have 1 meeting in the next 30 days, and that's October 2nd. So if at October 2nd's hearing, none of the members that participated changed their vote, your case is deemed denied by operation of law. The applicant or any aggrieved property owner may request a rehearing of this board within 60 days of today's public hearing. Further, any applicant or aggrieved property owner may appeal this board's decision to Chancery or Circuit Court within that same 60-day period, but once 60 days has elapsed, this board's decision is final and no further action can be taken. If you're an applicant and your case is approved here today, it is necessary for you to come and pick up the permit for which you've applied. It should be noted you have 2 years from today's date to obtain a permit and commence construction on your request for this approval to remain valid. If you let 2 years and a day expire, you have to come back to this board and seek reapproval of your case. Mr. Chairman, I submit that all cases were filed in proper order. Applicants were notified by certified mail as required by the zoning code. A legal ad was published in the Tennessean, and property owners within 300 feet were notified by first-class mail. And before we begin today's preliminary announcements and consent agenda, the board allows elected officials to address the board should they wish to. Are there any elected officials present who wish to address this board today? And Ms. Hughes was just telling me Council Lady Langster wished me to pass to the board that she had intended to be here today, unfortunately cannot, and would like to note for the record she has sent a letter also, but wanted the board to know that she is in support of case 86 located on the bottom of page 3 at the end of our agenda today. Thank you, Linda, for letting me know that. Other preliminary announcements, Mr. Chairman, I don't have one. The consent agenda. Now, the board has a consent agenda. A board member reviews the record in each case prior to this public hearing, and if in their opinion the applicant meets the criteria for the application they've requested, and they feel that testimony in the case would not alter material facts, they recommend the case to the remainder of the board for approval. I'll now call into the record those cases that have been recommended by the chairman, Mr. Whitson. And if there's anyone here in opposition to any of the cases that I call, please raise your hand. I'll remove the case from consent agenda, and we'll hear that case in its regular order on today's agenda. The first case recommended for consent is case 2014-79, Rahindra Bhakta, the appellant for the property at 201 Crossings Avenue. The item A request in this has been withdrawn by the applicant. The consent item is for the variance in regards to wall signage for the Holiday Inn Express. Is there anyone here in opposition to case 79 on page 1, 201 Crossings Place? Mr. Chairman? Seeing none. The next case recommended for the consent agenda is on page 2, top of page 2, case 2014-80, Mr. Ken Cunningham, Michael Ray Dickerson, the owner of the property located at 322 South 16th Street, requesting an item D in the R6 and historic zoning to replace the non-conforming residences in this case. Any parties present in opposition to case 80 on 322 South 16th Street? Okay, seeing none. This case comes before you. There's actually been some legislation that has affected this case as well. Actually, to the applicant's benefit, recently the Metro Council changed the regulations on duplexes and their arrangement on the property. Yesterday, the Historic Zoning Commission approved the applicant's request in regards to setbacks and such. This is before the board only for permission to destroy the residences and allow them to reconstruct. And the Historic Zoning Commission has approved his proposed reconstruction and drawings for that. With that case is recommended for the consent agenda, case 80. The next case recommended for the consent agenda, bottom of page 2, case 2014-83, the Islamic Center of Nashville, appellant owner of the property at 7335 Charlotte Avenue, requesting a special exception in R40 to construct a new 7,000 square foot mosque in phase 1 and approval of a phase 2 the gym in phase 2, referred to the board under section 1716-170. Are there any parties present opposed to case 83 at 7335 Charlotte Pike? Okay, seeing none. This is a special exception request that conforms with all requirements of the special exception. Mr. Chairman recommends that case for the consent agenda. The next case recommended for the consent agenda on page 3, case 2014-85, Lipscomb Academy, appellant David Lipscomb College, owner of the property at 1013 Caldwell, requesting a special exception in R10 to authorize the construction of a new field house, parking lot, and two 2,300 square foot buildings, referred to the board under section 1716-220G. Opposition present to the case? Okay. We do have that case will be removed from consent and heard in its normal order on the agenda. And finally, the last case recommended for the consent agenda, case 2014-86, 22nd and State Street Apartment Complex, ING 2000 Incorporated, owner of the property at 2200 State Street, requesting a special exception in MUGA to construct an apartment complex. Any parties here in opposition to case 86? Okay, we do have folks present in opposition. So we'll pull that from the consent agenda and hear it in its regular order. Okay, Mr. Chairman, recapping cases on consent, case 79, 80, 83, and that is your consent agenda for today.
Okay, so we have a motion for consent. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor? Oh, I'm sorry.
Clarify me on that first one. What was the first one, the withdrawal?
The item A portion was withdrawn by the applicants.
Okay, so we have a motion, a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes.
If you're here for cases 79, 80, and 83, your cases have been approved. You are free to go. With that, we will call the first case here in just a moment. It will be case 2014-82. Tim and Cindy Baines are the applicants here. If you'll come forward, sir. If you give me just a moment, I'll queue up our presentation. Are there any parties here present in support for case 82? Yes, sir, you're free to go. Anyone in support of case 82? Any folks opposed to case 82? Okay. Seeing none, sir, you'll have 10 minutes to present your testimony. Give me just a moment, and I'll bring up the photographs and such to show the board. Okay. Thank you, members. Does that come across clearly on the view screens in front of you? Had some issues with a couple monitors syncing up, so I want to make sure you guys are able to see it. Folks in the back, anything showing above your heads there? Okay, I'll work on that. Okay, members and folks with us, if you'll address your attention to the front. The first case is 2014-82. The subject property you see here is on the south margin of Sharp Avenue. This will be just west of Gallatin Pike. It is in the RS5 zoning district. The nature of the request is it's a variance in the side setback. That rear setback variance is not needed. So record reflect that we'll strike the rear setback variance. This is to authorize construction of an 8 by 10 deck to it's the side of the existing residence. This is the aerial of the subject site, and then the proposed deck addition. Front Sharp Avenue is at the bottom of the page. The proposed deck construction here running toward the rear of the home in this location. I do have some additional photographs I'll show that the applicant submitted as well. But this is the subject property upon my visit. The proposed construction you see along the right-hand side of the property. These are the properties to either side on the right and left and right, upper right-hand side. And a view from the alleyway looking at the proposed addition in the upper left photograph, and then from the side property line. I did note, members, there's a carport on the adjoining property. I'll need to check into that. It appears to be in violation of setback as well. Give me just a moment. I'll pull up a couple of photographs the applicant submitted with his. Members, I'll admit, working without a mouse is sometimes difficult, so forgive me for my slowness here. These are drawings submitted to our office by the applicant upon the submittal of the appeal. And during this time, I'll let him kind of address those, and I'll have these available, sir, for you to talk about. That was the aforementioned carport. Okay. Those are the photos submitted by the applicant. With that, sir, I'll turn it over to you. You've got 10 minutes to present your testimony. For all the appellants here today, to your right on the shelf, I guess you'd say, or countertop there, is the clock that will have the time allotted for your presentation. It will run for testimony. It will stop for any questions the board has and your answers to those questions. But once your answer is completed, we'll restart that clock. So it'll be just to your right as you're sitting up front. With that, I'll turn it over to you, Mr. Bourne.
Actually, Joey, I have one question. What is the required setback?
Oh, setback required is 5 feet in this zoning district.
Started construction on the deck because we have. And then it was called to our attention about the setback thing. We thought because of their carport, we thought there wasn't any kind of setback rule. And so somebody brought to our attention the setback thing, so we stopped immediately and came down and went through, started going through this process to find out about this. But as you can see, there is such a narrow, there's a narrow gap between the houses here. It's in East Nashville and Sharp Avenue. And there's like 11 feet between our house and 11 and a half feet between our house and the property line, and about the same on the other side. And, on our back, we have this driveway. And so somebody brought up, well, what about building a deck over the driveway? And I thought that would be catastrophic if somebody knocked out one of the supports from underneath the deck, if we had, because we'd have to have support underneath. So, and then we also have a drainage system. We paid, because we're at the low point in the neighborhood, and so we paid about $10,000 to get a drainage system to pump water away from the house. And so what we're seeking is approval for this deck, and it's actually about 11 by 18 or 11 by 20. I don't know why they wrote down 8 by 10, but all in all, it's about 11 by 20. And so we're just seeking approval to be able to build there, because there's really no other place where we can put a deck. We checked with all of our neighbors, and they all said fine, and that there wouldn't be any opposition to it. And so I don't know if you have any questions.
Which neighbor is Mr. Vaughn? Is he the neighbor with the carport? Or is he says he's your next door neighbor at 1032?
Yes, with the carport.
That's this person?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. I didn't know the last name, but I should. But they just bought this house and the carport was already up. And so we saw them putting the carport up, so we just assumed there were no rules against setback. So, and they also have a shed back there right on the property line, and so we just thought it was fine. So that was why we began construction. Then as soon as we heard about the rule, we stopped. So that's where we're at.
The plan indicates an addition on the back. That's existing or what?
The addition on the back is what you're seeing, where that view from the alleyway to the up to the garage. The garage is the lower level, and our bedroom is right above the garage. It was an addition to the house that we put on last year, and we had all the permits for all of that construction. We've been working on this for 14 months now, on this whole house. So just thought we'd add a deck, thought it'd be a nice touch.
Do we have any other questions?
Was there any opposition to this?
No, Mr.
No.
Okay.
You plan to enclose that deck?
No.
Why are the posts so tall on the side?
We're having I forget what you call those.
Here, they got like a pergola design on it.
Yeah, a pergola. Yeah.
Any other questions? Or? Okay, then I'm going to move to close the public hearing and start debate.
Thank you, Mr. Banks. We appreciate you.
Thank you.
Okay, truthfully, I would have put it on consent agenda, except they were halfway through and it's right on the line and some other things. But I definitely see the narrowness as a hardship, and it doesn't seem to have any opposing parties. So I really didn't have a fundamental problem. I just didn't want to put it on consent since it was halfway done.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's legit to take it off consent, but also to hear from the applicant that there was good reason to start the project on his own, and it should be applauded that when it was determined that he needed to come here, that he stopped and came here. So, I mean, I think that's, we have seen plenty that kind of do their own thing and ask forgiveness much, much later in the process, and I think that it's admirable that he didn't, so I do appreciate that.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to move that the board approve the variance because all of the requirements of MCL 17.40.370 have been met, and the board finds that the unique characteristics of the property or the narrowness of the lot, as well as the existing driveway and drainage system in the back.
And can we add a caveat that it not being closed?
Sure. And with the caveat that it'll always remain open and not be enclosed. Got a motion? Is there a second?
I'll second.
Got a motion? Got a second? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Passes.
Thank you. By not enclosed, we can have railings.
Yeah, railings, no problem.
Okay, just not. Okay. Gotcha, okay.
All right, sir. You're approved. Just follow back up with the codes department on Monday and pick up the permit. I'll talk with you just a second here. Mr. Chairman, give me just one moment. We'll go ahead and call the appellants in next case 2014-84, if you'll come forward, please.
Case 84 can come forward.
Okay. That's probably not a good thing for you.
Okay, let me, just a moment here. Okay, thank you for your patience, everybody. The next case before us is case 2014-84. Mr. Chip Christensen, the appellant. Everett Lowe, the owner of the property located at 1502 18th Avenue South, requesting a special exception in the RM40 UZO districts to construct a new 43,066 square foot condo building with maximum 10 units, referred to the board under section 17-12060 F3. The appellant has alleged jurisdiction under 1740-180 item C. And before I begin, Ms. Jones?
Yeah, I just want to make sure that under full disclosure that I disclose that Earl Swenson and Associates and I have had a business relationship many years ago working on the Symphony Center. It's been over 7 years since we've worked together. I want to have no problem objectively being able to impartially look at this case. So I just wanted to make sure that everybody was aware that we had a long-term relationship at that point. Okay?
Joy, did planning revise their recommendation?
I'll look to see.
I have an old one, but they're different. They did. Okay.
David, Linda distributed one yesterday afternoon.
Okay. Okay.
And I can get you a copy of.
No, I've got the both of them. I just wanted to make sure that they were both for the same case.
Okay. And then before we begin this case, any parties present in support for the case? Okay, we do have some folks here in support. Any parties present in opposition to case 84 on 18th Avenue? Any oppositional parties? Okay. Guys, you'll have 10 minutes to present your case. Let me go through our case record first and show the board the submittal, as you saw in the first case. The subject property you see here is surrounded in red. It's in the RM40 zoning district on the east side of 18th Avenue South, just north of Capers Avenue. Here, this is an aerial photograph of the subject site. This photograph, I believe, was taken in 2013, February or so. Damage to that structure that's there. The nature of the request that's before you is a special exception in the sky plane and height provisions. The next 4 photographs I'll show you are submittals by the appellant showing the portions of the building that are breaching that sky plane line. The sky plane line is noted by the red line, which you see here. This view is from 18th Avenue facing into the subject site, and then views. This will be the north elevation, showing the portions of the structure penetrating the sky plane. The south elevation. And then the elevation from the alley side, this will be the western elevation. You see it there. East, I'm sorry. Thank you. My apologies. I chopped off my first letter there. The east elevation. This is a view of the subject property upon my visit. You see the existing structure on the property, and then views to either side of the subject property at multifamily uses to the south, I believe office type structure to the north, and then across the way there, the university. I'll go back to the...
Joey, the other thing I wanted to disclose, I live on the Vanderbilt Ingram Commons, which is kind of across the street from this. I don't think it affects me. I don't own the house, the dorm that I live in, so, but I just wanted to disclose that this is a piece of property that I pass by frequently.
All right, with that, I'll turn over the case to the appellant sitting before you. Again, there were parties also present in support, so for the folks at the table, if you'd like those members to parties to speak, they'll be part of your 10 minutes here, and I'll let you decide when they come up. I'll leave that totally up to you guys. With that, I'll turn it over to the appellants in this case.
Good afternoon. My name is David Minigan with Earl Swenson Associates, the architects. Just a couple of things I'd like to mention. Number one is from a density standpoint, we're not maxing this out. We're looking at a maximum of 10 condos. But the size and the quality of these condos are such that we are looking at a 5-story structure with the parking below. So we could have gotten more height out of this, but it would have really wedding caked this back and been taller, but really not been as good an urban solution, we believe. We really want this to fit in with the character of the neighborhood, so the materials are much like what was in the house that actually just is coming down now. Actually, it's, I think, been pretty much demolished. But brick and some stone on the base. The other thing I would note is although these elevations are very two-dimensional, it does show the stair tower on the north and the south. Well, I'm sorry, on the street side and the alley side, which is the east and west, which is only a small portion of that elevation. So it doesn't extend to the edges of the property. So in the elevation, it appears that it's breaking the sky plane more than it really is. And we do have a rendering that shows that was not submitted, but we have copies of that now. And the other thing about this is it shows the existing character of the street, and the fact that from the sidewalk up to the front door is a little bit of an elevation, which is there now. You can see that in the existing photographs that Joey showed. We're maintaining that to maintain that street character and pushing the building back a little bit. So that actually allows the building to be up a little higher than it would be if we just cut the site completely down. And I can, Joey, I can submit this rendering.
That would be great. Does it also show you said that what you submitted originally showed a greater sky plane issue than what is going to actually happen?
No, sir. We're consistent, but you can see from this rendering that stair tower on the 18th Avenue side is really just a portion in the center of that elevation, so it doesn't extend side to side along that elevation. If that makes sense.
I'm not sure I know what you're saying, but
Basically, the fact that stair tower is just in the center, it doesn't go edge to edge, so it's not impacted.
Oh, right, okay, I'm sorry.
Go, I'm sorry.
I'm Chip Christensen, and I think David covered everything, and we're happy to try to answer any questions that you have, and happy for the neighbors to give their opinion as well, but I'm happy to share with whatever.
Can I just ask a question? I mean, planning recommended we disapprove, but they gave two options, either to go to just a fourth floor instead of a fifth, or to have a fifth that was all in the sky plane. Did y'all discuss these with them, or?
We didn't discuss them. We've looked at that to see if we could do that before we had to ask for the variance. It's fairly impractical to do that because first of all, we're trying to make these very gracious condominiums. These are not dormitories, or this is not student housing. Mm-hmm. So the size of those is such that it's hard to make those, it's hard to cut those back and wedding cake that up to avoid the sky plane. So that's really the main issue.
So,
David, how many feet are you into the sky plane here? I didn't see that. I didn't know how many
Well,
feet.
it depends. That's the
like
short
1
answer
foot,
is
5
each
feet?
elevation impacts it just a little bit. And again, on the
Is that like a 10-foot
that's
intrusion into it, or is that a 30-foot intrusion?
no, that's about 11 feet right there. These are
Okay.
12-foot floor to floor, so it's about
Okay.
11 or 12 feet.
Okay.
That's a little bit less on the sides that abut properties on either side. So alley side and street side is about 10 or 11 feet.
I think the answer to your question is on this page with the pink chart. It says that 1,646 square feet are outside the sky plane.
I was looking for a linear footage.
Linear.
in from the elevation.
Okay.
I might mention one thing, Mr. Ewing. When we had the meeting with the neighbors, there was a representative from Vanderbilt was there, and I don't think she expressed any.
No, in fact, Mary Pat
Mary
Teague sent me an email afterwards that says she's fine with it.
And clearly Vanderbilt just bought the Sony building kind of at the end of the block too, so.
Yeah.
Do we have any other questions?
So what is the real reason that you can't cut back and make at least the fifth floor comply with the sky plane? Strictly dollars or what? I mean, these are massive units here. They're not.
You could do that, sir. It really has a detrimental effect to the unit when you cut it back like that. And quite honestly, I don't think the building would be nearly as attractive if you tried to put those slopes in the side. We went through and looked at this. It's not impossible, but it's not very practical.
These are huge units in comparison to, you know.
The genesis of this is that I'm looking for a place to live. And looking around, I'm a condo dweller. And in looking for a condo that was of sufficient size for me, I had a difficult time. There's lots of condos in the market today, but the vast majority are under 2,000 square feet. And these will run between 2,000 and 3,000 square feet each. If you'd like to hear from our neighbors.
My name is Betty Nixon, and I live at 1607 18th Avenue South. My neighbor, Brian Jackson, who lives next door. This property has been a problem property for 20 years. We are so happy to see this development. We do have one not concern that I talked to the staff about. We would like to see this variance for this property for this builder, and not just to go with the land. So, because of all the problems we've had with the property in the past, we want it to be conditioned for this development for this person. I understand that is possible.
And Ms. Nixon, you speak from experience. Remind us when you were in the Metro Council.
In the dark ages.
And how long have you lived in the end of this block?
I've lived on 18th Avenue for 43 years, and there are 8 large single-family houses on the opposite side of the street after you pass Capers. And we have been trying very hard to figure out a way to live happily, and we have been living happily and with multifamily across the street, and in a mixed neighborhood. But we think this development enhances where we're trying to go, and so we are in support. Brian can speak for himself.
My name is Brian Jackson, and as Betty said, I live at 1611 18th Avenue South. I've only lived there for 14 years now, so I've got a ways to go before I get to Betty's record. But like her, I'm strongly in support of this project. I think it's a very well-designed, thoughtfully designed project, and it's going to be very good for our neighborhood. So we're very enthusiastic about it and happy that this plan has come along, because as Betty indicated, we've had issues with this property for quite a few years. It actually burned about a year and a half ago and has been vacant and burned out for that period of time. So I'm thrilled that Mr. Christensen has come along and with this particular plan, so we would enthusiastically support his request for a variance.
Do we have any other questions?
Yes, I do. Give me 1 second. Just 1 second, Chairman.
Things are getting crazy down at the end when he's got his calculator out.
I just can't do math on the fly. I mean, I can do math, it's just not accurate. So just out of curiosity, it looks like on the front elevation that you're on the plan that's sort of got the typical floor area, and where you show what's breaking the sky plane. I just want to be clear that at the ground, you're inside the setback, and it's only when you get to the sky plane that we're the 1,600 feet. It's not 1,600 feet on every floor. It's just at the 5th floor. Okay. I just want to make sure that was clear to me and everybody else. That's how I see it, and I just want to do my math.
Any other questions? Dick, are you good? I mean, you're...
No questions.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Then I'm going to move to close the public hearing. Discussion?
As someone that now lives in this particular vicinity, I think it says a lot that the most immediate neighbors, and I guess Vanderbilt University too, support this. Betty Nixon has been a champion of this area before it became hip and represented the area nicely. And I know if this was not what she thought was the perfect thing for the area, she would not be sitting here saying that. And so I think they've done their homework. I think this is obviously much better than what was there, and it's also probably a big vote for the neighborhood that's going on right now.
Yeah, I agree, and I think that the rendering is a really nice thing to have because it helps me understand what you're planning to do, and also a little bit better about how the sky plane issue is. And just from the initial materials that we got, if you see a 2-story cut into a sky plane, it really raises a flag with us. I mean, I think sometimes most of the sky plane issues tend to be just 6 feet, just very, very small. And I think that this really helps us understand it. And I'm also familiar with the street and think that this rendering fits nicely with some of the other condo projects that are there. It seems to be in the same type of character, and the fact that neighborhood support and we don't have opposition from Vanderbilt and testimony that Vanderbilt is supportive, I think it's worth doing.
Okay, I'd like to find for the record that we don't find any adverse impact on the air, light, shadow, or wind velocity patterns by the invasion of the sky plane, and that the impact on the project would be greater than the impact on any of those patterns. So, with the permission of the board, I would move that the board approve the special exception for height sky plane because we find that the requirements of MCL 17.12.060F have been met. Got a motion? Got a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Passes.
Thank you very much. Thank
Thank you for your investment in this community. Nice community. Love to see that. I really do.
Yeah, it's not.
Can we?
Okay, the next case before, yes.
Joey, assuming this is still possible, we passed that motion, and I do think we'd like to take Ms. Nixon's suggestion that it be limited to this individual builder.
Oh, yes. I agree, totally agree with that.
So I guess
For purposes of record, let's amend the motion.
Okay.
You make the amendment, Ms. Jones, second, and
I'll second.
proceed.
Okay.
Okay, members, for the record, motion's been amended and second. I do need a vote, a voice vote, please.
All in favor of the amended motion? The amended motion? Aye. Any opposed? Passes.
Do you know what just happened?
I think I do.
Okay, they just attached that it would apply only to this building.
Okay, Mr. Chairman. Can the next case before us, case 2014-85, Lipscomb Academy, the appellant David Lipscomb College owner, and I greatly apologize for my typo. My English teacher's, if he's watching this, he's going to get on to me. Owner of the property located at 1013 Caldwell Lane, requesting a special exception in the R10 district to authorize the construction of a new field house, new parking lot, and two 2,300 square foot buildings referred to the board under section 1716 220G, which is the section dealing with the recreation center. The appellant has alleged the board would have jurisdiction under section 1740 180C. I know the appellant's here, opposition present as well. Okay, we do. Each side, as I talked about before, each side will have 15 minutes to present their case, but before you begin, let me go over a few items.
And Joey, I also want to do my normal disclosure that I have worked with Barge Cawthon in the past and occasionally still do when they'll have me in my professional capacity as an architect, if that bothers anybody.
I also need to disclose that I have sat on a board with Seabtuck, the architect of this project. But it will not affect my ability to be objective about this case.
I currently work in a building that Seabtuck worked on. It's very nice.
Well, while we're airing,
Holiday Inn Express last night.
while we're airing our aprons here, Steve and I worked together. We kind of introduced into architecture a long time ago, but we hadn't worked together in a long time, so I'm good with it.
David and Chris, you feeling left out?
I don't even know the third guy at the table, so.
Okay, members, this request you may look at on first blush and ask, why is this a recreation center? Given our longstanding policy in the Codes Department, athletic fields tied to a school or university that are not on campus fall under a definition of recreation center for us. It's set up under Section 220G and not under the school section. But again, this request comes to you for a proposal to seek approval to build a new field house, which you see in my graphic here, and 2 future buildings at 2,300 square feet.
Wait, so how's this not on campus?
It's actually the Lipscomb Academy campus is located on the west side of Granny White Pike here in the aerial photograph.
But
and subject
So
side
this is Lipscomb University, and of course the academy is there.
Yeah.
So it's not a campus. When does it become a campus exactly?
Once, if
How many buildings they got to have to be a campus?
well, it's
Well,
got
it's
to actually
contiguous,
be the school facilities. The only way this would be a school site for us is if Lipscomb Academy moved their academic buildings to this site, or
I see.
somehow acquired it to be all in the contiguous
Okay.
parcel.
I understand now.
There you go.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. The request too is also to construct, to restripe the existing parking area, which you see on the north side of Caldwell, and install a new surface lot or redo portions of an existing lot that sit here along Doris. Some of this area on the north would be new construction for parking. But the request before the board today is to seek approval for this field house in phase 1, and then future phase would be these 2 structures coming. Future. This is a view of the subject property upon my visit. The applicants have turned in some photographs, and I'll bring those up here in just a moment. These are my visit to the site. I'm standing actually on Maplehurst, looking toward the football field on the site plan. That'd be roughly right in here, where the letter Z is in zoning review. Then views along Maplehurst, east and west. And then the proposed buildings would be sitting, we'll start first with the upper left photographed, would be located approximately where my cursor sits here, which would be the opposite photograph is at the bottom right, somewhere in this location. This parking lot that you see here exists today. Those existing areas would be restriped and new lots would be constructed, just to the background of this photograph here. These views on the left-hand side of the pane are the views looking along Caldwell. See there. Give me just a moment to pull up the applicant's photographs they've submitted to us as well. It's a great television, by the way.
During this opportunity, I'm going to talk about recusal because it comes up a lot. There are actually, we all disclose whenever we have relationships, and that's always wise because disclosure is good, but there are very specific rules as to when we should recuse ourselves, and it is when we have this is not to y'all, this is to the world. When we have a financial interest in the project, or if you're actually representing the project. Other than that, there was actually an appeals court that criticized a board when people recuse themselves too often just for knowing people, because by definition, we know people, and so we're not supposed to recuse ourselves just because we have some prior relationship. It's got to be a financial interest, and so that's for the world. So when everyone discloses how we all know each other, that's wise, but nobody should recuse themselves based on that.
Mr. Chairman, here's the
and it's contained in our conflict of interest policy inside of our bylaws.
Bring these photographs up, the appellants, if they'd like to address as far as where these are located. I'll go ahead and turn over explanatory purposes only.
I'm Dan Barge, I'm civil engineer with Barge Cochran Associates. I'm the project engineer for the Lipscomb Academy Fieldhouse. I'm joined by Dr. John Lowry, who's Lipscomb Vice President for Community and Government Relations, and Steve Tuck needs no introduction. I am here we're here to seek your approval for a recreation center special exception to allow the construction of the field house adjacent to the existing football field and grandstand. Joey's done an excellent job, of going over the different phases. I will say that the site is about a 16-acre site zoned R10. The eastern portion of the site is located within the newly mapped FEMA floodplain and floodway. If you refer to, I think you all have the drawings perhaps. Joey, did they get copies of the drawings? The tight blue dashed line on either side of Leland Lane is the actual floodway. And sort of the meandering solid blue line that sort of comes from the Caldwell-Leland intersection up into the site is the, like I said, the newly mapped 100-year floodplain. It's interesting that the result of the 2013 flood maps actually lessened the extent of floodplain and floodway on this lot.
Mr. Barge, can you, for the board's benefit, go over the difference between a floodplain and a floodway?
The floodplain, and this is sort of, I don't want to get technical because I've got smarter people that work for me that could explain this better, but the floodway is a zone within the floodplain where development encroachment would result in a 1-foot rise within the floodplain. And that's a national standard that the FEMA adopted years ago. People like to explain it in lay terms that that's where the water flows. That's where the velocity of floodwaters go. The floodplain is is elevationally dependent. It's where the water stands in a 100-year flood, which is a 1% annual chance of an occurrence. Does that make sense? Okay, thank you very much. Again, Joey has accurately described phase one. It's an 8,200 square foot field house, including restrooms, locker rooms, trading facilities. We're planning to renovate a portion of the northern portion of the existing stadium and expand the parking up along Doris. Phase two are two detached additions totaling about 4,600 square feet each. The renovation of the balance of the stadium, all the concrete sidewalks, which we'll talk about in a second, a conversion of the field to synthetic turf, a total rework, restriping of the existing parking lot. Phase three, which is shown on the third sheet of your plan, was shown at the neighborhood meeting and is shown to this board just for informational purposes. In talking with Joey and Lipscomb and understanding that your special exceptions actually expire after a certain period of time, and knowing that Lipscomb is several years away from probably pursuing the indoor practice facility, again, we include it for information only, but it's not a part of today's request. In dealing with the site, the proposed fieldhouse footprint, as you will see on the solid blue line, there is just a small intrusion into the 100-year floodplain by this project. We're allowed to do that per Metro stormwater regulations because of three reasons. Number one, it's prior manipulated. It's already developed. It's a parking lot. Number two, we have to provide compensatory cut fill volumes, meaning anything we fill in that area, we have to go remove out of the floodplain some other location. And thirdly, because we are required to elevate the finished floor of the structure 1 foot above the 100-year floodplain, stormwater will allow this kind of development in the floodplain. The site, as Joey pointed out, is nearly all in pavement now and mostly impervious. As we've done on lots of other projects, we intend to employ lots of sustainable stormwater management practices like pervious concrete and pavers, heavily landscaped bioretention areas, possibly rainwater harvesting. As we go to a synthetic field, our irrigation needs diminish. And we believe in doing this that the volume of this future development actually will reduce the amount of runoff that runs off from the site compared to what's running off today. Another added benefit to doing those kind of things at a educational facility is it provides the students an opportunity to see and understand what good environmental stewardship is about. We've done that at other schools, and we're excited about doing it at Lipscomb. We are working with Metro Public Works and Planning to construct sidewalks that take on more of a walking path kind of feel. By that we mean we want to locate them about 15 feet plus or minus off the actual edge of the asphalt travelway, both on Caldwell and on Leland. Doing that on Caldwell preserves a mature row of trees, which we think is important. Doing it along Leland allows us not to have to put fill in the floodplain and the floodway and reroute existing culverts, and plus we think it's safer to sort of reroute it, to relocate it off the edge of the road and pretty much in the location where there's an existing mulch path that's very popular and heavily used by the neighbors. Of course, all these walks will be approved by Public Works and meet ADA guidelines. In addition to the landscaping with the bioretention areas, all landscape regulations will be met. We plan on installing an evergreen hedge along all perimeter all perimeter parking to shield the trespass of car parking, lights from cars parking at night. Ms. Laura Schroeder with Hawkins Partners is here if you all have any landscape questions. And finally, what I'd like to say is we can't emphasize enough that this is an existing facility. This is an existing football field and stadium. It's been there for many, many years. Currently, it's my understanding that visiting teams use small areas under the existing stadium for halftime and changing in that. And this field house intends to sort of raise the bar on Lipscomb's facilities to allow something a little better than that. We feel like the parking, the loss of parking, the parking lot is used for daily student parking. It's hardly ever full. There are always shuttles coming in and out. It's used for event parking. The big use of that parking lot is on the 6 or 8 home football games, and Lipscomb has recently implemented some exciting changes to how they manage that. So at this point, I'd like to turn it over to Dr. Lowry to talk about some of Lipscomb's efforts to continually be a better neighbor.
Can I jump in for just 1 second, because I at least want to put something on the record. The planning department recommended approval subject to you meeting the sidewalks, which I heard you say you're going to meet the sidewalk requirements, and also subject to landscape and screening, which I also heard you say. So you're meeting both conditions of the planning approval.
We still have some discussion to do with Mr. Macy at Public Works, but we are confident we can come to an agreement and get their agreement.
Well, I'm sorry. I'm back to the sidewalk. So are you saying that you're negotiating to use the mulch trails in lieu of meeting the sidewalk requirement?
No, they will be concrete sidewalks. The negotiation is to depart from a standard curb and gutter roadside section and be separated from the actual travel path.
So along Caldwell, are there existing walks or?
No, there are not.
And are there sidewalks planned?
Yes, but they're just on the other side of a tree row adjacent to the existing, or actually inset to the existing parking.
Okay, I see. I'm sorry, I was looking
Yeah,
at
this
the wrong
is,
plan. I got it.
we've actually done this separated walk on occasion before in Metro, and it's interesting. Public Works is actually doing the same thing right now in Sevier Park because they have site constraints similar to what our site constraints are.
Okay, thank you.
And we approved it at a Y one time as well.
That's correct.
Well, good afternoon to each of you. I'm thrilled to be here to have the opportunity to kind of tell you about what this will do from Lipscomb and also the process that we've used with the neighbors in terms of getting to this point. We've been at work hard for 3 or 4 months in terms of engaging our neighbors, starting with Councilman McGuire as well as Russ Willis, the president of the Avalon Neighborhood Association that has worked with us and guided us through this. You'll see a letter of support in there from Mr. Willis. Through that process, we have had conversations with the Avalon Neighborhood Association Board. We had a meeting with our neighbors, as we stated that we would, to where we provided them with an opportunity to give us input. They did so, and we had several neighbors show up and provide us with some very wise counsel in terms of what we might do to make this facility more conducive for the neighbors. The neighbors use it primarily for recreational purposes, and they were very interested in 3 things. One was they were concerned about traffic involving shuttles and things like that. We've taken some very significant internal measures to make sure that we manage that traffic and manage the speed of shuttles and of high school students driving to their football practice, which you can imagine is quite difficult, but we've done it. And in the meeting that followed, we got several positive comments in terms of our ability to successfully mitigate the speed of traffic in and around this particular site. The second thing that the neighbors mentioned to us was the parking during football games, which Dan's been very gracious. We've got to go deep into the playoffs to get to 8 games. That's really about 5 games every year, and maybe 6 if we make the playoffs. But there was some questions raised about parking during games, and we've implemented a very sophisticated parking strategy now, starting with a game a couple of weeks ago that we will continue going forward. We now have the ability to park with the use of professional parking service to park many more cars at the site using the grass area that sits between the field and Leland Lane. Before, it was just kind of chaos in terms of where people park. Now it's done in a very orderly and systematic way, and we use the same service that parks the Titans and parks Vanderbilt and their athletic events as well. And so with that, we've been able to actually increase the parking at the site, but then we've also added a remote parking location, and so there aren't cars parked in inappropriate places. And we've engaged a shuttle service that will take them from a lot at the Granny White Church of Christ that sits very close to the facility, and we are actually moving people from that overflow lot. And in our first week of doing this a couple of weeks ago, it was met with great success and great response from both the neighbors as well as the patrons to the football game. And so we feel like we've addressed that issue as well. And then the last issue that they raised was really their desire to have a park-like atmosphere at this facility. And that is something that we are very committed to trying to accommodate. And one of the ways in which we hope to accommodate it is through maintaining this trail that kind of wraps through part of the site right now. And as you'll see right now, the trail kind of cuts through the middle of the site. When we do this construction, that will eliminate that. And so we've made arrangements for the trail to extend around the perimeter of the site, which many neighbors have told us will be something that's very welcome as they use this for jogging and running and walking dogs and things like that. And so we're thrilled that we were able to accommodate the neighborhood in this way. And as a result of that, we've been blessed to have overwhelming support from the neighbors that we've talked to. We did meet with the neighbors again leading up to this hearing here, gave them an opportunity to see the finished plans, and again, their response was very, very strong. See?
Just quickly, I wanted to show a couple of visuals. One is what you would see if you look from Leland. You can see the stadiums, the stands themselves, which over the next few years, going through renovations, they just went through some renovations this past summer. You can see the project located right here in both phases built, the 2-story phase being phase 1, the 2 wings being phase 2. And this gives you a little bit closer feel for what that will look like if you look at it from the street. So again, brick, residential materials, sloped roofs, such as that, so.
Thank you very much. We'll reserve the rest of our time.
Thank you. You've got 2 minutes and 53 seconds. Okay, opposition, please.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, as the opposition comes forward, Mr. Tuck, do you have a paper version of those two drawings or something you could send me electronically? I can do that. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Hello, I'm Kathleen Polis. I live at 4015 Leland Lane, and I have for 41 years. I've been taking notes as they were writing, I'm sorry. I'm here not only because David Lipscomb continues to change the entire character of the neighborhood, but because we have no control or input on these changes. I was a part of the original process in 1980, being one of the neighbors that was against this. Originally, David Lipscomb made several agreements and promises with the neighbors for permission to build a stadium. To date, every one of those promises have been broken. There have been 45 permits issued to them since 1982, changing their original plans. This is the first notice that we have received of those 45. They even managed to build a structure in the floodway 2 weeks after the 2010 flood. David Lipscomb has been on their best behavior lately. Suddenly, they've become good neighbors, trying to appease us again to get their plans passed. I'm not looking forward to 45 additional permits after this passes. They've added a driveway at the corner of Maplehurst and Leland just recently, where traffic can go in right at a busy intersection. They did get Metro Police to, and this has not been approved. I checked with Mr. Rowan at Traffic and Parking. They did get Metro Police to help them on game night, but other people have been pulling in and out of there since then because it's still there. And they are using it on game night to pull cars down in and park in the grass. The plan of buffers at Morrow and Caldwell, but not at Maplehurst. They also planned these buffers in 1980. They've removed a majority of those buffers. They've also, promised the shuttle in 1980. Guess what? They just started it. So I'm sure, and I'm afraid that as soon as this gets passed, that will stop. And they keep saying they're home games. They use this is a multi-use. They even let Syracuse park their practice there. The Orangemen practice when they were going to play the Titans one time. They use it for intramural track meets. They use it for young teams come and practice there. They rent it out. There's a cell phone tower there, so it's not just 6 home games. They are planning a very large building that is considerably in the floodplain, and a high school that they haven't mentioned. And this is a college-owned property, not a high school-owned property. They have met with the neighbors 2 times, making all the promises they've made before, and none of those neighbors are the same neighbors, so they don't know that the promises most likely will be broken. I would just wish you not to approve this without a little more consideration on the neighborhood. It impacts us tremendously. The no parking signs that were put up on Maplehurst and Caldwell in the 80s to keep people from parking there, they didn't work. Maplehurst is a median with 2 small streets on each side. People were parked on each side of each side, and a small car could not hardly get down in between there. If those houses were to catch on fire, a fire truck would not make it down through there. Like I say, right now they're running the shuttle. I don't know how long that will last, but all those no parking signs now are not on Maplehurst or Caldwell. They've been removed. I don't know who removed them, but they're not there, and they've just they're a good neighbor when they want to be, and yes, that track is there for anybody that wants to come drive to it or walk to it. But again, the impact of 1, 2, 3, 4 new buildings and then a high school is going to impact our area tremendously, and they do not keep their promises. They do not keep their promises. Thank you.
Any questions?
I'm sorry. So when there's events there, there's still parking issues on the streets, and
There have been until just recently when they made this plan, they have gotten the shuttle for the last 2 home games.
And would you say people are parking where they're supposed to be parking, or are the people still parking illegally?
There were no parking signs up. Majority of them are gone.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, they park all along Leland, Maplehurst, and Caldwell.
So my question to you is that there are currently games being played there and a lot of other activities. And basically, these facilities are really about providing space and shelter for those activities. I guess my question to you is, from a big picture standpoint, what would you prefer them? Why would you prefer them not to build a facility that is protective versus an entire? I mean, it's not as if they're building a whole new opportunity here. I mean, it already exists. It's already being utilized. I guess I'm just curious as to why you're objecting to these buildings, which are really more helpful to the teams that are playing there.
Well, 4 new buildings, 5 new buildings once the high school gets built. It's a college campus. It's supposed to be. They're building high school things. And in 1980, when we approved it, they promised us that it was only for 6 home games, that this was just going to be a minimally used area. And it has just grown and grown and grown. The lights are on at all hours. The intercom is on at all hours. My neighbor across the street on Leland, he's out of town, taped them at 5:30 in the morning, sandblasting and cleaning off the stadium. It's an intrusion. It's an intrusion into a quiet neighborhood. And the more you build it, the more intrusive it's going to become. Thank you.
With the time remaining, let me respond to some of that. There was a lot there. First off, let me make clear that Lipscomb Academy is a separate K through 12 institution from Lipscomb University. Lipscomb Academy is actually, I think, one of the largest private K through 12 schools in Nashville. And if you think about athletic facilities associated with those schools, this is where our athletic facilities are located. Interestingly, as we think about activity here, we actually have much less activity at a site like this than we typically would, because we do have other areas for soccer and for some of the other sports that would typically go on a field like this. So there's actually less activity than there typically would be for an athletic complex like this, because we do have other facilities that we move other sports to. So the activity here is going, as we move forward, is not going to change. These facilities are already, many of them existing underneath the stadium in very tight and cramped quarters. And this field house would allow for larger restrooms to be used by the public during games. It would allow for team rooms and fitness facilities to be enhanced and also enlarged that are currently kind of squeezed underneath the stadium. In terms of the comment about no control or input of the process, again, we work closely with the Avalon Neighborhood Association in terms of designing our process for engaging the neighbors. We've had 2 public meetings that neighbors have been invited to. Many neighbors showed up. Neighbors provided comments, and we made changes to the plans based on neighbor comments. We didn't have all the thinking in place that we did with regard to this trail. Once we heard that it was a value-added piece of this community, we made the decision to invest in this, and we want to create a park-like atmosphere in direct response to what was communicated to us by the neighbors. In terms of the driveway here that is down in the lower right-hand corner, that is really the flattest area into which to get vehicles into that particular grass area where that parking is. It's true that intersection has not been regulated. As far as I'm concerned, there's not been any problems with the fact that it hasn't been regulated. But now, under the new parking regime that we've implemented, there was actually a Metro officer and others that were managing that particular intersection. I'm sure it was the safest it's been in years. And so I feel like we've addressed any issues related to traffic down in that particular corner. In terms of the parking signs, we did put no parking signs up for the games. Those are temporary signs that we then remove. And so, yes, those signs have been removed, and they will continue to be removed because those are the signs that are really associated with game parking and things like that. And with the nature of it, people aren't going to park there and have no need to when there's not during games. I think that's my time.
Thank you very much. I'm going to move to close the public hearing and start discussion. Well, I'll start off. Just go ahead. I'm sorry, Mercedes, you go ahead.
I certainly hear the concerns, and I, with all due respect, I really think that you all have done a nice job with this package and meeting with the neighbors, and I think that's one of the bigger concerns, of course, is it's a very tight neighborhood. A lot of activities are going on, and I think the engagement is really critical, being a good neighbor. I certainly respect and understand the challenges that you have there. But this is, to me, it seems to be a very thoughtful approach to an existing location and providing the value back to the community that's playing there and involved in that space. So I have no issue with the fact that there's fields there that exist there. This is just kind of an enhancement to it, and I think it's been thoughtfully designed. So that would be my...
I would agree with every word you said. I would also like to compliment the school on inviting the neighborhood in to use the facilities. I personally grew up 4 houses away from a high school, and it was a tremendous asset for the neighborhood. I appreciated it greatly as a kid, and I mean, as we become more dense as a city, we're going to bump into each other a lot, and having green space through the schools is a heck of an asset for the community. So that's just kind of my personal perspective on it.
So you're working out the issue related to the sidewalks, you said?
Yes, yes.
And the rest of the access will basically remain the same to get on this?
Yeah, that's correct.
Will there be any new entrances?
There is a new entrance, if you look on the first sheet, near on Caldwell, close to Leland, that we actually talked to Public Works and had it have it approved by Public Works. We were trying to get it in before the first home football game for a logical circulation for buses to come in on the westernmost Caldwell entrance and then be able to exit out. But that has not been built, but Public Works has okayed that additional access.
You raised a point of order. We need to reopen the public hearing.
Yes.
Oh, sorry. I'm sorry. Yes, I'm sorry.
Oh, I didn't know.
Yeah, he closed.
I'm sorry. That's my bad. I did that inartfully at best. Sorry.
However, we could move to reopen it.
That's what I move we reopen because I want to hear it.
Okay. Okay.
And I have a question for Dr. Lowry, too.
Well, we need to vote.
Yeah.
Oh, to vote. Okay.
Okay, so we've got a motion to reopen the public hearing. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? I'm really sorry. I'm moving too fast today.
I'll second.
We've got a motion and a second. Thank you.
Dr. Lowry, your job is to kind of handle the neighborhood and government relations and things like that at Lipscomb University. you had neighborhood meetings? Has the council person kind of been involved, and what has your dealings with the immediate neighbors been on this project?
They've been very positive. We engaged Councilman McGuire from the very beginning of this project. That was our first meeting as we started this process. He has advised us and worked with us throughout the entire process. You'll notice in the record there's a letter of support from Councilman McGuire. We have very positive relationships with our neighbors, and through this process, in addition to the public meetings, I have had many cups of coffee with neighbors who have come over with very specific questions about this project and other things that Lipscomb is doing in the neighborhood. And through that dialogue, I think we have got to a place where people are very comfortable with us moving forward. Some of that has been expressed through the leaders of the neighborhood association taking a positive position with relation to this project. And so under my tenure in this position, that will continue in terms of how we will engage the neighborhood as we continue to grow and try to fulfill our mission.
Well, it sounds like you've definitely have lines of communication up. I know it's hard, people that live in the neighborhood and, when a university or any institution wants to expand, I know you all have been there since 1891.
1891.
So it's, this is growth that I think most of our higher education facilities are doing, but this will mainly be used for sporting events. So what about the parking lot? Will that be used, this new parking lot, for any other purposes?
Again, that is part of the current use. This provides overflow parking for the university that we shuttle people to and from. That is episodic, it kind of just depending on what's going on campus and given the season and the time of year. And it follows kind of the academic calendar and the event calendar on campus. And so as it currently is, it will continue to be used as an overflow parking facility for us, to where we will shuttle people to and from the campus for events.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay.
One thing that the opposition had brought up, there was a planned high school on this site. Did you want to respond to that?
There is no planned high school on this particular site. There is plans in terms of an institutional overlay that was passed years ago in terms of Lipscomb Academy. However, that growth is years from now in terms of when it will come, and is obviously very fundraising dependent. We're a long, long ways from even starting that process or that conversation.
Hang on one second. Our opposition has just put her hand up that she's got something in her hands, and a letter from where?
To David Lipscomb, people about the high school.
To you as neighbors from the high school?
No, actually, it was an email sent within their community explaining the high school and how excited they are and the money that they are raising for the high school.
If I might say something, the high school was announced 2 years ago. They had a very large donor, and one of the reasons they wanted, and so we did some preliminary planning and a rendering of what a high school might look like that we use for the purposes of getting this donor base excited about the possibilities. And that's as far as that design work has gone. And I think the university has said there's other priorities now. That's probably 10 years plus off that high school. And it was between this property line and Granny White. It's not on this particular site.
Okay, I'm going to try and bring this back into what's before us. I mean, we are, Joey, this is a question for you. We are only approving the plan before us. And so if anything was changed of that plan, they would need to come back before us, correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
That's just option.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, so do we have any other questions for the applicant? Okay, then I'm going to move to close the public hearing and have discussion.
I guess
Until David went off golf course.
in fairness and clarity, if I need to ask our legal counsel there, would it be proper So that this does not appear that we have overweighed the side of the appellant in this case. Should we give the opposition an additional 3 minutes to, I'm not saying I want to open up a debate between the two. You understand what I'm saying?
Right. The board has authority if it's the pleasure of the board to allow the same amount of time to the other side if additional time is given to one side. But that would take a motion of the board to do that.
Well, yeah, and if we're debating that, we didn't really give additional time because they were answering questions.
Yes.
Really isn't debited to their time. If we're debating
Just
this.
straight questions. It wasn't an additional time.
Yeah, and I mean, because I'm a little bit wary. I mean, I think where we would go is to something that's not before us.
Right.
Yeah.
And I only raised the question about the high school simply because it was brought up, and I just wanted to ask them if they wanted to address it. And they did. They didn't have to, but I don't think it's an issue. I think in my mind, it's been clarified. So.
And the board does have the authority to also ask questions of either party if you have. Right. And that does not necessarily count against their time. But if you wanted to give either, additional time, then the appropriate thing could be to give additional time to the other
And I
side.
think the record will also show that there was considerable time remaining on the opposition if they wanted to add anything else.
Dick, you good? Or
I'm easy. I just wanted to be sure we didn't appear that we were heavily leaning toward one side or the other.
I think we were asking questions and not just giving someone additional time.
Okay, so I think we've closed the public hearing, and we're now in discussion. Mercedes is right. Some of the discussion occurred before, so I'm not going to repeat myself, I don't think.
No, me neither.
Okay, well then I am going to make a motion that the board approve the special exception because all the requirements of MCL.17.16.150 and 17.16.220G have been met. Is there a second? Got a motion, got a second, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes. I may need to take a 5-minute break.
The board will stand in recess. We'll be back in about 5 minutes. Than their base zone district alternatives. With that allowable encroachment on the traditional setback, there are some limitations placed on how much of how tall the building can be at that setback. Nature of the case here, it permits a maximum of 5 stories in the build-to zone. And on this graphic, the build-to zone is a between 5 and 15 foot area from the property line, which is here. Of this building, only 9 feet, that 9-foot blue hatched area is the part that is encroaching into the sky plane, if you will. In that build-to zone, you can do 5 stories. Once you scoot back at 15, you're able to go an additional 2 stories in that. So the portion that you see here is a 9-foot wide portion that wraps the building along 22nd and State Street. So it's that 9-foot wide strip that runs along 2 boundaries, which you see there of the structure. This is looking at the subject site on the property. Permits have been issued. You see work here. Our office did issue a foundation permit on this before the appeal. Foundation permits are taken at owner's risk, just for disclosure, so I don't want the impression that they're out here working without a permit. These views in the bottom left photograph is the intersection at 22nd and State Street. State would be the street running horizontally, 22nd here. So the sky plane encroachment would be along those frontages, which you saw here. And then views of adjoining properties across State Street to the south in the upper left photograph, looking back toward West End and toward the southeast. You see the Baptist Hospital complex.
St. Thomas Midtown.
St. Thomas Midtown, excuse me. I'm old-fashioned there. But that is the case record as our office has it. You do have a recommendation from the planning department in support for the request. And letter, as I stated earlier, a phone call and a letter from the council lady in support of the request. And with that, I'll turn over to the appellants. There is opposition present, so there will be 15 minutes per side. And with that, I'll turn it over to you all, gentlemen, to identify yourselves and make your presentation to the board.
Chairman, members of the board, my name is Tom White. I live at 36 Old Club Court. I represent the applicant in this case. To my right is Bill Lockwood at Barge Wagner, and to my left is Ted Cromer with Giordano. We appreciate you saving the very best for last today. And with that comment, I'll comment that this is a particular de minimis special exception as presented by the staff. It is 9 feet of encroachment on that 6th floor only. That's it. We have a recommendation of approval from the Planning Commission because it is mandatory when considering a special exception like this. You've read that report. There's no equivocation about their support. Council Lady Langster has written you her support. She intended to come here today to speak in favor of it. She's not feeling well. That's why she's not here. She did call the staff. I think it's well known to all the members of this commission that the Midtown area is one of the hotter areas in Nashville. They're encouraging the residential development as well as the other development in that area. This fits in with that pattern. It's totally consistent with all of the zoning requirements. We sent out a letter to all the members of the commission dated September 16th. You may have had a chance to review that, but everybody on the board understands the difference between a special exception and a variance. A special exception consists of uses that are encouraged and supported by government. There are just conditions that need to be met, and then it is to be approved. In this particular case, I've spelled out in our approval letter the special conditions, the general conditions. We clearly meet all of those. I don't think there's any dispute about that. I don't think that we need to take the entire time for presentation, but I did want to introduce Ted Cromer to my left. As I said earlier, just discuss generally what you're looking at in these pictures. But again, it's a special exception favored by law. We have to meet the conditions. We've set those out. No dispute. We meet the conditions. And finally, it is the 9 feet on the 6th floor, and that's it. That's the only request we have. Ted, if I could ask you to address the specific plan. Thank you. If we can save 2 minutes for rebuttal, I think we'll have plenty more than that, but thank you.
Board, this is 22 State. Essentially, it's a concrete podium building on the ground floor, and then it has 5 stories of stick construction or wood construction above that. We are set back approximately 6 feet along 22nd Avenue, which is this facade, and we're set back the same 6 feet on State Street. Within the build-to zone, which is between 0 and 15 feet, the code permits a 5-story building, and outside of that build-to zone, it permits a 7-story building. So we have exceeded, as Tom said, in that one area right along here and right along here on the 6th floor, because we have the podium and then 5 levels above that. So this is 146 units. 138 of them are 1-bedroom. 8 of them are 2-bedroom. All of the parking is self-contained behind the units that you see here. We enter one parking area from down here on the lower level, and we enter the other parking area from the upper level. So it's totally self-contained in terms of parking. and meets all of the other requirements of the zoning code. Well, you've got that on your screen, and you can see that. The special exception that we're asking for is that we be permitted to build one additional story within 9 feet on the two sides that face out on the street. There'd be no impact on the light or air of anyone around us.
And how many parking spaces are in the
I think 148. It's one per bedroom, not one.
So, I
per
mean, you're not
unit.
asking for a parking variance, so it meets codes with
No,
whatever.
sir.
I was just curious.
Mr. Chairman, I'll clarify. We meet every requirement of Metro, and in addition, there is no objection by any Metro department. We've been signed off by all of them. The last thing I'll comment about before we close is that, as you know, under your rules, there's a required neighborhood meeting that's to take place. We set that up through Council Lady Langster. It took place there at the Parks Department. We came to the meeting with my client, a representative of Barge Wagner. We did the presentation there. There were two people that came, and one of them is here today in opposition. We respect that right. We followed up with that individual, but that's the only contact we've had, and we've responded. I can tell you to everyone that we've had contacts from, that's the opposition as we know it. We respect that and appreciate that, and we'll close on this and leave whatever time for rebuttal. We appreciate your courtesies, and obviously we'll stay for questions as well.
To get a clarification, Mr. White, I believe he stated that we're requesting to exceed by adding the fifth floor. That's not the entire fifth floor. That's only a portion of the fifth floor that exceeds that area.
Yes, sir. It's only 9 feet of the fifth floor. It's just a very small portion of it.
It's just that 9 feet coming down the front of the building, that's correct. That's the only request. We'll stay for rebuttal and then answer any questions. Thank you for your courtesies today.
All right. And Miss, you're welcome to come to the table as well if you'd like to. And for both folks having a seat with us, again, as we talked about at the beginning of the hearing, that 15 minutes is between the two of you guys. Feel free to divvy it up as you wish. And with that, I'll turn it over to you to present your testimony.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is George Spanos. I'm with Rogers, Cam & Shea. I actually work at the law firm across the street from the building. And I raised my hand for opposition, and we've clarified everything with Mr. White and Mr. Kroger. We just essentially didn't ever receive notice, didn't know what the plan was, didn't know what the special exception was for. Upon reviewing it, looking at it, answered all the questions we had. We just wanted to reserve our right to oppose it and figure out what was going on when it was called. And since I had raised an objection, I just wanted to address the board. With that, I'll step down and allow this woman to continue. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
I'm Jennifer Pennington. I represent 209 and 211 22nd Avenue. And this area was recently upzoned dramatically. It had a huge increase in density, as did Green Hills. And what the appellants are asking for is an extra story and extra height. It is not just a little bit of extra height. And I just wanted to make that clear. I think, stay within the density allowed. It's way more dense than it was not long ago, less than 2 years, I think. And now they're asking for more. And I just, at some point, you got to follow the rules. That's all. Thank you.
Let me ask you a question. And I thought I read that same thing from a comment earlier. Is it your belief that they're asking to be allowed to add the entire fifth floor?
It's the sixth floor, if you'll look at the diagram.
Well, okay, fifth, sixth,
So
whatever.
the current zoning allows 5 stories in 75 feet. They're asking for more height, and they're asking for a 6th story. That's what's on the drawing.
But you do understand they're really only asking for a sky plane. That floor can exist. They're just asking for a 9-foot section of it to be allowed on the sky plane. The floor can exist regardless. It's not just a floor.
The
That's all they're
zoning
asking for.
says 5 stories, 75 feet, and then you go up and back.
But that's the point. They're asking, that's why they're here in front of us. It's just a very small portion. They can still have that extra floor. It's just a piece of it.
That's not what it says in the code.
Okay.
So,
Yeah, I mean, and you're right. I mean, that's what the code says. At that point, you are supposed to go up and back, and they're here to ask for the special exception. So you are absolutely right in saying no. That's what the code says, and so I didn't want to make sure that you didn't think that we did, that
No,
we're
thank
debating
you.
that piece
It's,
of it. So
right,
absolutely.
it's the step back is, the floor's allowed to be there. What they're asking for is that 9-foot section to be allowed, is the question.
And I think our challenge is how do you, is the same issue that you're talking about, is the increased density is, what does the code say? What is the conflict potentially with, new growth and new density with neighbors that have been there and that type of thing. And we looked at the Planning Commission and council and other people and testimony for advice, but you are absolutely correct in what you said, that is what the code says to do, and then they're coming saying, we'd like to have a special exception against that rule.
right, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I'll be just as brief. Obviously, as was stated in the past dialogue, we can go to the 5 stories without any permission from anybody. What we're here, and we know we can go to 7 stories, but you do need the special exception if you're going to have the setback, which is what we've asked for. So I think what was said in this last dialogue made it very clear. And so we're asking for a special exception for the 6th floor only. It's the 9 feet that we've addressed there. That is our request. And with respect to density in the city, there's absolutely no question that the Metro plans have indicated of the million-plus people that are to be in Middle Tennessee within the next, depending upon the studies, 15 to 20 years, the bulk of them, the city's encouraging to be downtown, which is why you finally got some residential growth downtown that didn't exist. We had a couple hundred people living downtown for the longest time, and now you've got some significant growth. This is the type of thing the city is looking for. The infrastructure's there. It's a win-win for the city financially because the infrastructure's there. The density's now coming back. It's making the downtown Nashville area, specifically this area, and others vibrant. So we think it's a good request. Again, if it's a planning decision, they've recommended it without reservation. If it's a political legislative decision, the council lady's been totally supportive and would have been here today to do that. So we think it's a very minor special exception request. We understand it is your discretion. We're respectfully asking for it. Thank you for your courtesies.
Questions? Okay, then I'm going to move to close the public hearing and enter discussion.
I think this is along the same lines of what we've been dealing with, and the fact that there is overwhelming support for this, even from the Planning Commission, which we actually disregarded in the last decision. I think that it speaks a lot to, this is a 9-foot section, but is supported by the community, and I think that's a negligible amount of feet in order to accomplish this particular sky plane issue. And I think it's a thoughtful urban design, especially from a 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom concept right down there, which is we're desperately in need of.
Yeah, and I agree, and I do respect. I do think that as our city grows, that there will need to be some thought given to rules and especially urban rules, and as they change, I think they'll change in this direction, especially because of recommendations like the Planning Commission. I do think that in this project, when you look at 22nd and State, and you look at the sky plane variance request, the criteria that we have in terms of wind and light and other obstructions to other properties that was never raised. I don't see it, in my opinion, without any testimony against it, I don't see it as a problem. So I think it's a fair request.
Okay. Okay, I do think I love your point because there's been no testimony or evidence that there'd be any adverse impact on air, light, shadow, or wind velocity patterns due to the configuration of the building. Therefore, I'd like to make a motion that the board approve the special exception for height/sky plane because all the requirements of MCL 17.12.060F have been met. Is there a second?
Second.
Got a motion, got a second, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes. Okay, with that, the Board of Zoning Appeals is adjourned. Thank you.